All right, so we're in Judges chapter 9. Today's lesson to you is brought to you by the word irony. Irony is irony is like saying that the ironing board has a wrinkle in the ironing cover. That's irony, but using the word iron to. All right, so keep your eyes peeled on the words irony. Did none of you got that? Did you?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, it just wasn't funny. Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay. I care, but not that much. I guess it's a response. Okay. All right. So as we think about what we're going to do today, here's our outline. So we're going to go through. We're going to march through the Judges chapter 9, the transgression, the rebuke, the war with Shechem, Abimelech's death, and conclusion. Don't worry about writing these down. I will have markers throughout the scenario as we walk through it. I'm not going to have a great big PowerPoint of those elements, but I do have some slides to go through. Because it's important to me that, as you can tell, I like maps. I like maps and pictures because they kind of give you the context. We get kind of parachuted into this feeling. We have no idea why we're talking about Abimelech and what's all around them. So we're going to look at a few maps today. So we're going to first look at Shechem. Shechem is just a small town. You can see that. Shechem's up the top. We'll narrow in, but last week we were looking at the town of Succoth. Succoth is over here. Good things happened to Succoth last week or no? Anybody awake last week? All right, it was bad things. Gideon came and destroyed the town after they had refused their blood brothers or blood cousins as Gideon and his armies are going through and saying, "Can you give us some refreshments?" And they said, "Are they in your hand yet?" "No." "See ya." And so he promises to come back and destroy them, and he does that. So that's what's happening in Succoth. Otis over the thing is Shechem. We'll talk about that. But here's the town of Bethel, the town of Ai. How many of you pronounce that Ai in your head? All right, stop it.
Thank you.
It's just Ai. Yeah. Now, having said that, you were taught that for years and years and years.
Yeah.
All right, and they've actually discovered, probably in the last 20 years, some documents that lead you to believe that it's just I. That and 50 cents will buy you a half a candy bar. And then we have the Mount of Olives down here and in Bethlehem. So again, it's kind of ironic, again, that word. When you go to Israel, you see this map and you think, so far apart, and yet everything's really close together. It is only about 31 miles from Shechem down to Jerusalem, right? And Shiloh, well, here's Bethel's about 10, Shiloh's another 10, and Shechem's about 10. So it's just, they're all really close together. 10 miles, you can be there in 2.5, 3 hours or so. All right, so that's kind of places you there. But if we zoom in a little bit, Shechem is between the mountains of Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, right? And so we're going to talk about that. And so here's a picture. Here's a modern day picture of Shechem. Shechem is in the modern day town of Nablus. It's a Hamas hideout. We didn't know that before we went there. I'm still breathing a sigh of relief every time I think about that. But here's the interesting part. We went to a national park in Nablus. That's where the town of Shechem was. And this little spot, you can't hardly see it, down in here is where we're going to be standing. I'll show you the next picture in a second. But that's an interesting spot because from that spot is one of the things that's called a standing stone. And if you think back about Joshua chapter 24, when Joshua was challenging the nation of Israel and saying, as Joshua was challenging the nation of Israel, and he's saying, "You're not going to follow the Lord." And they go, "No, we are." And they went, "Joshua, no, you're not." And he says, "As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord." This is probably the spot where he said that. Now, here's the probably is that it's a standing stone. Do we know that this is one that Joshua had? No. Is it like it? Yes. Is it the same spot? More than likely. So this is the spot where Joshua is issuing that. If I were to throw a baseball in that direction, I would hit the town of Sychar and the woman and the well of the woman in the well in John. So all these places are just all right near each other. So as I turn around from this spot and I look the other direction, now I have Mount Ebal on the place of curses, and I have Mount Gerizim, which is the place of blessings. And in the front here, you have Mount Bob. So this is Doug Bookman and Dave McManus. This was a wonderful part. This was our Israel trip in 2019. So again, Shechem is the town. Just to give you an idea, I don't think I have a list. Yeah, I do. Shechem is the town where Abram built an altar in Genesis chapter 12. It's where Jacob settled. It's the town where Joseph's last free days in the land were. Joseph would never come back to the promised land until he's buried. What town is he going to be buried in? Shechem. Some 500 years from now. It's a town of refuge. It was the town below Mount Gerizim, the place of blessings, where Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin were, and is also below Ebal, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. And the Levites were officiating from that. So this is a town that has this continual place in Jewish history. It's the place where Joshua confronts Israel. We just talked about that. It's the place where Joseph was reburied in the plot his father Jacob had purchased about 500 years before. Well, almost 600 years before. And then it's a place where Rehoboam will be anointed king, which will result in, Rehoboam's foolish mistakes will result in dividing the kingdom. You see how Shechem, even though it's 30 miles from Jerusalem, is kind of in the center of all that's going to go on for the next several hundred years. And the town really becomes a place or a symbol of rebellion, if you will. So as we continue on, I'm going to have you turn to Judges chapter 9. Again, we're going to not hit every last verse as we did before. This is a narrative, so I'm going to hit the high points. So our story begins in the town of Shechem. The site of Shechem, again, is located in the modern-day town of Nablus. The ancient town of Sychar is only a stone's throw away. Shechem sits at the convergence, as we looked at. Let me go back just a second. Sits at the you see the lines coming through. These are the trade routes that are there. Shechem is right there. So it's going to be in the center of the trade routes. It's going to be the center of ideas as they come through. Shechem is in the middle of everything. So let's see. So we're going to go through Judges 9, 1 to 6 and talk about the transgression a little bit. So the odd thing about Shechem, Gideon, whom we looked at last week, was from the town, or from the tribe of, okay, here's your pop quiz. You weren't listening, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You might have listened. I'm kidding, but it didn't turn, wasn't funny either. So which tribe was Gideon from? Manasseh. Very good. It's a gold star. So he was from the tribe of Manasseh, but that's situated further north. Where Shechem is actually in the tribe of, lost my place, in the tribe of Ephraim. And we looked at last week how the tribe of Ephraim is trying to essentially press its point and get political gain. We read in Judges chapter 8, where we left off last week, now Gideon had 70 sons who were his direct descendants, for he had many wives, and his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he named him Abimelech. So we looked at a little bit last week. Here's the line. Again, Jair, who we'll look at next week, is a second cousin twice removed. And there's another judge that I have covered up, but he's off to the left. So Gideon has 70 sons. Jether is the first one, the middle 68, and then Jotham is the youngest one. And we'll read about them in a second. But there's also one by a concubine in Shechem called Abimelech. And that's the old school spelling, L-E-K. What's that? Oh, okay, all right. So Abimelech is the key character for us today. His name means, my father is king. Now, again, what was the word of the day? Irony. Gideon made a big deal that neither he nor his son is going to be king. But as you begin walking through this, do you remember why Gideon's brothers were killed last week when we looked at it? The two guys, and I can't remember their names off the top of my head, Zeba and Zalmunna, they both said the reason we killed them is they carried an air like they were important. I think Gideon and his whole family were quite wealthy. You can't have 70 sons and not have some money. So they had some money, and they were kind of exercising rule and authority over the tribe. And they carried themselves as being, the whole family carried themselves as being wealthy. They were killed just for that appearance. So Gideon, I think, lived like a king, and the family seems to have been enormously wealthy. We saw this mixed message when, again, Zeba and Zalmunna because the brothers carried themselves and dressed like they were like royalty. So that follows up on what we looked at last week. Ephraim, who was brother to Manasseh, is rising in influence, but it's in a negative influence. And a bunch of Canaanites still live there. Last week I made mention how in Judges chapter 1, the Canaanites, Ephraim cannot seem to get rid of the Canaanites. And when you get to the end of Judges, Ephraim still cannot get rid of the Canaanites. Despite the 400 years that goes in between, they've not been successful at booting them out. That's like us not being able to boot out the British from Cleveland. I mean, they can have Cleveland. I don't care about Cleveland. But it's like we can't kick them out. 400 years they've been there. And the Canaanites just cannot be removed, and the Ephraimites are not doing anything. Partly because, as we looked at today, they're not walking in with God, they're walking in accordance with their flesh. And we'll see that throughout the day. So Abimelech's mother, it says she's a concubine. Now I want to distinguish what that means in context. Abimelech's mother was not a prostitute. Being named a concubine in this story means that they had a binding relationship, she and Gideon, right? But that she lived with her father's relatives. So it's as if they're married. They've entered into some kind of sort of contract. But she's not living with Gideon. She's living with her parents. And what you almost get the idea is that kind of arrangement is done for political purposes. Like when the King of England gets married to the bride of Spain or the bride of someone from France. Right? They're getting married for political purposes, not for any other reason. Again, remember, you'll see this in Judges 9 verse 18. Jotham, the final son, calls her a female slave, but I think that's just taunting, to be honest with you. So despite this formal relationship with Gideon, Abimelech has a lower status in Gideon's clan than many of his other sons. Abimelech wanted to rule over his people instead of his stepbrothers. And so Abimelech gets up out of his chair in verses 1 through 6, and as you read in verse 1, now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, depending on how you want to pronounce that, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and spoke to them and to the entire family, to the household of his mother's fathers, saying, "Speak now in the hearing of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, for 70 men, all the sons of Jerubbaal, to rule over you, or for one man to rule over you. Also remember, I'm your bone and flesh." Now, that word bone and flesh doesn't mean anything theologically. It just means I'm your relative. I have the same blood as you. I'm of your relatives. It's a technical word called a hediotis, when two words are put together to mean the same thing, and that's meaning that they're your relative. All right, so again, it's another literary technique. We'll talk about that a little bit later, when we actually discuss irony, what that means. All right, so you begin to see Abimelech's actually starting to stir up trouble. So he's telling the people who are his relatives, go to the leaders of Shechem and ask them, would you rather have someone you don't know and don't care about you over you, and all 70 of them, or would you rather have me, a blood relative? And so Abimelech's trying to stir up trouble in that way. So the observation points to a problem that all rolled into one. Gideon protected the clan and the tribe against the Midianites. But the notion of having 70 sons and at least one son to solidify political aims indicates that Gideon was living like a king himself. In other words, Abimelech thinks that now that Gideon's dead, I will try and rule off in the same site. And will we rather have someone ruling over us that loves us, like I do, or will you want these 70 peoples who aren't even here with us? So Abimelech's trying to divide the nation, or the tribe, in that way. Now, when we say king can mean a really small neighborhood or a large one. King used here is a lot like the king of Hazor. We looked at Hazor, one of the towns that was burned by Joshua. Well, the king ruled over that city and some of the neighborhood villages, but that was the extent over which he was king. It's more like, in our verbiage, that would have been more like he was the building commissioner of Cook County. He had a ruling over an area, maybe a town or a township, but that's about as far as it goes. All right, so some things to note here. When Abimelech then challenges them, and the Shechemites say, yep, that sounds like a good idea, then the first thing that they do is they go off to Baal Berith. And it doesn't tell you anything about that. I can't remember which verse is it. Verse 4. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the house of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Now, it doesn't tell you anything about Baal Berith, does it? It's a Canaanite temple. And it's a Canaanite temple, again, why is a Canaanite temple sitting in the middle of Ephraim? Nobody knows, but they can't get rid of him. So here's a temple right in front of them, and they're actually worshiping there enough that they've got 70 spare shekels of silver to be able to fund going off and murdering all Gideon's sons. After the rule of Gideon, we find this at the end of Judges 8, Israelites fall back into the idolatry at this temple. Abimelech and his worthless and reckless, how'd you like to be memorialized in Scripture as a worthless and a reckless man? So he goes off and kills the 70, all but two of the 70, he goes off and kills all but one of the 70 sons. He goes off and kills everybody but Jotham. Jotham had hid himself. Abimelech was then made king by the oak of the memorial stone, which was in Shechem. Whose memorial stone? The same stone we kind of took a look at. If I can give you a little bit an idea again. Again, whether this is the one or not, but it's probably the place and what it looked like. It's a standing stone. And it was beside this then that Abimelech was made king over the region. So Abimelech gets his wish. And
It's right there where he killed 70 men in that.
No, I don't think he killed them there. It's just like that. And the reason I say that is that Abimelech was over Shechem, where Gideon was ruling from was a town southwest of Shechem. And we're going to look at that when we get closer to the end of the story. But it's a far ways. It's about 10 to 15 miles away. It's not very close.
Oh, I was reading it wasn't the same.
Yeah, it's not the same stone, no. Yeah. But it's like that idea. And it's like a mass killing then.
Thanks.
All right. No, thank you. The stone by the oak is where Rehoboam is installed as king. Again, he's really almost, actually now that I think about it, it is the same stone. He's trying to say he killed them there, and it's almost like he's desecrating the stone, which is held in high esteem from looking at Joshua chapter 24. So it would be the same stone, right? So he's almost like he's bringing him to Shechem. But he's bringing him to Shechem to make an example of, you're coming under my rule, you're going to be killed at this stone, which Joshua said, this is where we're going to serve the Lord. He's almost mocking that stone in place. So, yeah, thank you for letting me fix myself. All right, so now we move on to the rebuke in Joshua chapter 9. So Jotham, the youngest son of Gideon, escaped by hiding himself. He makes his way, apparently, for Ophrah. That's the thing that's 6 to 7 miles away, southwest of Shechem. So what Jotham does, though, and you start finding out this... And verse 7, and now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim and raised his voice and called out. And he said to them, listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. And so Jotham, the final remaining son, begins to tell them a parable, including a prophecy of how they're going to be. Now, interesting, archaeology has found this spot on the side of remember which place where Gerizim was? On the north one or the south one? South. Yeah, because I should tell you that picture I was pointing at with Mount Bob. So Mount Gerizim is this one, and I'm looking west here, west between these two valleys, another part of the trade route. So halfway up, they've actually found this place, and it's called, it's called Jotham's Pulpit by Lore. So this is going back, the place, what's really funny is when you go to visit archaeological sites in Israel, you don't know something actually stood there, but what you find is that you go back far enough that enough things have been put there as a memorial to what happened. Like if you go to Bethel, there's nothing around except that in the middle of these crossroads of place, is a Byzantine church. Now, what would that be important for? Well, in the Byzantine church, they would have put a memorial to the spot where they think the house of Bethel was, where people might have worshipped. So if you can't find the thing itself, look for what the population thought afterward. It kind of gives you a clue. You can say it for certain? No. But it's highly likely that this is the place where something happened. And so they found the spot where it likely happened, that Jotham made this pronouncement. So Jotham tells a tale of 3 trees, olive tree, a fig tree, and a vine. And they would not give up anything to be king, but instead anointed a bramble to rule over them. And again, this is a clear allusion to Abimelech's heritage and reign. Jotham even slips in how incredulous he is that they're dishonoring the memory of Gideon, who came through here and protected them. And yet Shechem now is turning its back. He protected the entire tribal area around Shechem. The irony here is that Jotham is standing on the very mountain. What was this a mountain of?
Blessing.
And yet what is Jotham about to do now? Offer them a curse. He's going to prophesy their demise. When you get down to the next, let's see, verse 16. Now, if you've acted with honesty and integrity in making Abimelech king, and if you've dealt well with the Jerubbaal and his house, that's called sarcasm, by the way, and have dealt with him as he deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and saved you from the land of Midian. But in fact, you have risen against my father's house today and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female slave, again, that's kind of a taunt, king over the leaders of Shechem because he's your relative. So if you acted with honesty and integrity toward Jerubbaal and his house, remember Jerubbaal is another name for Gideon. If you've had an honesty and integrity towards him, be joyful about Abimelech, and may he also be joyful about you. But if not, which is my main point, if I might add, may fire come out of Abimelech and consume the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, which is, again, just a part, it's in Shechem. It's essentially a place of food, I think it is. And may they consume Abimelech. Then Jotham escaped and fled and went to Beer, and he stayed there because of his brother Abimelech. So Jotham is then uttering a curse from the mountain of blessing. Again, another irony that you would have an unexpected, you only expect that if you're going to offer curses, why not go to the mountain of curses? Instead, he offers a curse from the mount of blessing. So another irony. So again, he says, may the fire come out of Abimelech. And it's, in some sense, he's uttering, remember the chaos that happened? Remember our object lesson last week. What did you have in one hand? The trumpet, right? What was in the other hand? The jar, and when the jar was broken, you had the as the English would say, the torch, the light. And there was the noise and the light caused confusion, and Israel didn't raise a single arm, and God used the enemy to kill itself. 120,000 people. What Jotham is predicting for Abimelech and his people is the same sort of chaos. That it's not going to be Gideon who does anything, or Gideon's sons. Of course, Jotham's the only one left. It's going to be Abimelech and his people will kill themselves. All right, so back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, so down to 22. So we're at 22, a war with Shechem. Of Abimelech's reign, there is actually very little said. Imagine if you were to sum up your life, verse 22. Now Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. And that was the sum total of what they said about all the things you ever did in your entire life. You ruled for 3 years. Goodbye, good riddance, good luck. So that gives an idea of how well he's thought of in the scriptures. Again, we have to expect trouble as the prophecy has happened. As predicted, 3 years into Abimelech's reign, the mistrust begins. And this section may cause you to raise an eyebrow. We know that God is not the author of evil, but he does use evil for his purposes. Everybody with me on that one so far? All right, so again, we begin to see verse 23. Now, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and the leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. So behind what's going on is, of course, the people are becoming dissatisfied with Abimelech, but God, showing himself, just as he did in Judges chapter 7 and 8, to be in control, is now showing himself to be in control even of the retribution against Abimelech for all the evil things that he's done. And what he does, let me read another verse to you. If you can turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 22. I want to give you a little bit different insight. Of course, we have a new insight when we think about Job and how God used evil to get to Job and show Job his own heart and caused Job to actually worship when he repented. 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 20 through 23. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one spirit said this, while another spirit said that. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice them. Does that sound like any conversation you all have had with God and angels before? No. But what we find is just a little different glimpse of what's going on in the spiritual realm that we don't have insight into. And he continues on in verse 22, and the Lord said to him, how? And he said, I will go out. So again, God asking the angel how he's going to do that. I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all his prophets. Then he said, you will entice them, and you will also prevail. Go and do so. Now then, behold, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. Is God the author of evil? In some sense, though, he asks for volunteers of those who are evil for them to do God's will in this way. That helps me with a better explanation, I think, probably than I've seen before. Now, let me stop there. Any questions that I can't answer? Martha?
I think that passage is a little reminiscent of what went on with Job. And the little guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Very reminiscent of what went on in Job. So just to give you a different insight, again, God is not the author of evil. But God is not afraid to use evil for his purposes.
So in this text, you're interpreting the evil spirit as literally like a demonic entity sent by God?
Yeah.
And not an attitude amongst the sinful men at that time that was like judgment?
It's directly attributed to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right, good. Anything else?
Like Judas, the spirit in there, Judas too.
Judas is a good question. Judas is not my favorite character
Not mine.
in Scripture.
But the devil entered
What about-
him as well.
What's that?
What about Pharaoh? When
Pharaoh.
God used Pharaoh.
Yeah. So, yeah, Pharaoh the same way. Well, and you see, Pharaoh's kind of interesting. Tate referred to it today. How many times did God say that Pharaoh had hardened his own heart? In the 10. 10. I think it was 8. 2 of them, God hardened his heart. And you could come to the conclusion of they're actually both engaged in that process. That again, God's using because they're available and willing, they're using something to harden Pharaoh's heart. All right. So again, we're not going to solve it in 5 minutes, but it gives you an idea that we're looking at things that are somewhat beyond our comprehension, things that are beyond the spiritual realm we normally see. We saw the same thing regarding Saul in 1 Samuel 16, verse 14. Now the Spirit of the Lord left Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord terrified him. And Saul's servants then said to him, behold, now an evil spirit from God is terrifying you. So again, a similar exercise of there's a spirit that comes in over a person and dissuades them. So what I want you to notice is that, first of all, God is the one who's actually sending discord. I think there's a discord that's rising among the people, but God is not just passively saying, well, I kind of thought that might happen. God is sending the evil spirit in order to stir up the trouble. Right? That's happening in verse 22 to 25. After Abimelech has ruled 3 years, God allowed hostility to rise between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. And the Shechemites set ambushes in the hilltops to attack travelers, undermining Abimelech's rule. In verses 26 to 29, a fellow named Gael, a new figure, the son of Ebed, he moves into Shechem with his relatives. And he's going to throw some weight around and stir up some trouble. The Shechemites began to trust him and turn loyalty away from Abimelech. And at a festival, Gael mocks Abimelech and questions his legitimacy, which stirs up more rebellion. So now this spirit, these people moving in, God's in charge of all that happening. And Abimelech's then, his power is starting to wane. If you're in power and your power starts to wane, how do you begin to feel? Not so happy, right? Anything but the opposite of happy. In verse 30, we find Zebul, Shechem's governor and Abimelech's ally. He hears Gael's boasting, and he secretly sends messengers to Abimelech, urging him to set an ambush of Gael by night. And 34 to 41, Abimelech divides his forces into 4 companies, and he attacks Gael and the Shechemites in the morning. And Gael tries to rally the city, but was defeated. Zebul drove Gael and his rallies out of Shechem. So this rising had come up, this fomenting of discontent, and is actually, due to Abimelech's counterattack, was actually pushed away and thwarted. But is God always true to his promises? So the story's not done, even though it might look like, oh man, I thought this was it. But so in verses 42 to 45, Abimelech's destruction, he destroys Shechem, which of course could be foreseen. The next day, the people of Shechem went into the fields. Abimelech ambushed and slaughtered them. He captured the city, killed its people, destroyed it, and sowed it with salt, which was a symbol of permanent ruin. It was just, it was something I think done at Ai as well, that you put the rocks all there and then you cover it with salt so nothing grows, right? It's a good pesticide, so to speak, even for grass. Now, turn with me to verse 46 of Judges chapter 9. Here's, I think, one of the best stories. All right, so we find, that's a little bit too soon yet. 46 to 49. When all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard about it, they entered into the inner chamber of the temple of El-Berith. And it was reported to Abimelech that all the leaders of the tower of Shechem were gathered there. So Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon. If you recall our map, Mount Zalmon was southwest of Shechem, about 5-6 miles. So he goes up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a branch from the trees and lifted it and put it on his shoulder. Now, what was going to come out from Abimelech, do you remember? Fire. Okay, keep that thought in mind. So all the people cut down each one a tree, and each one his branch, and followed Abimelech, and put them on the inner chamber, and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem also died, about 1,000 men and women. So out of Abimelech comes fire. Verse 50. Which brings us to the next topic, Abimelech's death. Abimelech went to Thebez, and he camped against Thebez and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the middle of the city. And all the men and the women and all the leaders of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went up on the roof of the tower. So Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it down with fire. Now here's where Abimelech makes a key mistake. He has not watched Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. When Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "It's over, Anakin, I have the high ground." Who has the high ground now?
The people in tower.
The people in the tower. The people in tower can throw things. All right, so we'll come back to that in just a second. It's a key lesson in his social learning. He should have watched that movie.
Wasn't the movie after he was living there?
Film at 11, that's right. Right. All right, so about 1,000 men perished. So again, had he watched that, he would have remembered that famous line. But here's what's really funny to me. We know that then, as we continue the story, so as he comes to it, verse 53, a woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull.
Good girl.
So the woman has the high ground. Lesson number 1. Then he quickly called the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that it will not be said of me, a woman killed him." But we all know. So the young man pierced him through, and he died. And so when the men of Israel saw Abimelech was dead, each left for his own home. Like, party's over, let's go back, yeah. So in history, there have been a few paintings that have occurred. And so this is one painting of a woman, and I'm thinking, what a woman, to grab a millstone over her head and throw it down upon Abimelech. She aimed that baby, and she gets it. What amused me even more as I'm busy hunting for where can I get a picture of a woman throwing this millstone, is I ran across this in Pinterest, something for a children's coloring program. So this is for your junior church, and while Tate's preaching, you can have a woman throwing a millstone on Abimelech's head. Yeah, Jody, you look so confused.
Would that make her the first sniper?
Sniper's a long shot, which is irony of me to say that, of course.
That's the first rock concert.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a rock concert, yes, yeah. Yeah, and Abimelech fully got stoned, yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, so that brings us to the kind of conclusion here of Judges 9. So, one of the things I want you to see in verses 23 and 24 of Judges 9. Again, we skipped over it because I wanted to make it the point at the end. Did God send an evil spirit? What I want you to see, as we've talked about it, is God is sovereign, and he will not be mocked. And as much as he sent Gideon in to rescue the people, and even through the town of Shechem and over to Succoth and down, and he chased the Midianites down in order to secure the people's safety, Abimelech undid all of that. And through Jotham's prophecy, then, Abimelech was going to be destroyed. And God shows his sovereignty even over the evil spirits. But now back to verses 56 and 57 of Abimelech, or Judges chapter 9. So God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father in killing his 70 brothers. God also returned all the wickedness of the men of Shechem on their heads, and the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal, came upon him. So everything that Jotham predicted came true. You also see not only God's sovereignty, but his retribution for his people. God's not going to be mocked. He's going to come through with this. And these two statements complement one another, and they point to in a sense, the whole story as a whole. God causes the evil that Abimelech and the men of Shechem do to rebound on their own heads. The thing which they had planned actually came back on them in accordance with it. Now, I want you to compare. I've got, real quickly, the key differences between Gideon and Abimelech. Gideon rejected kingship by his own words. Neither I nor my son will be king. Now, the irony, of course, is that Abimelech, a son, was king. But Abimelech sought that of his own, not sought it of God. Gideon smashed the altar of Baal. Abimelech was smashed by a millstone. I forgot to put that in. But Abimelech took the silver from the house of Baal Berith to kill his brothers, a place of idol worship. That's where he funded it from. Gideon used the spoils of war for an ephod to Yahweh. Gideon also selected his military by God's direction to avenge the blood of his brothers, whereas Abimelech hired worthless men to kill his own brothers. So there's a big contrast and a big irony that someone so evil could follow after someone so righteous. Abimelech's name's not written in Hebrews 11, Gideon's is. So I think the third thing, so we see not only God's sovereignty, we see God's retribution and some of the key differences. I also want you to pay attention to this literary device called irony. There are three kinds of irony. One is verbal. You can look up the verses yourself, but 1 Kings 18, Elijah doesn't believe that Baal is a god, and he uses sarcasm to expose Baal's impotence. In Job chapter 12, Job means exactly the opposite of what he says. He says, when he says, truly then you are the people, and with wisdom you will all die. He's speaking to his counselors. With wisdom, with you, wisdom will die. Like there's no need of wisdom if you guys are around. You guys are great. So no doubt you're all the wisdom. And of course he means exactly the opposite. So that's one kind of verbal wisdom. And sarcasm kind of touches on that just a hair. You also have situational wisdom, where the outcome is opposite of what's expected. We find that in Esther, who was hanged, even though Haman planned to hang Mordecai, who was hanged? Haman himself. The hanger was hanged. The executioner was executed. In Joseph 37-50, Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, intending harm, yet God chooses that for good. The irony is that their plan to destroy Joseph becomes the very means of their salvation 40 years from now. Matthew 27, the soldiers mock Jesus with a crown of thorns, calling him the King of the Jews. The irony? He really was the King of the Jews. All right, that's verbal, situational, and then finally dramatic. Dramatic is, think about Caiaphas. When he said in John chapter 11, you know nothing at all, nor are you taking into account that it is in your best interest that one man die for the people and that the whole nation not perish instead. Caiaphas meant that for political gain. But little did he know that he was prophesying Christ's substitutionary death for all of us. John 19, now Pilate wrote an inscription, Jesus the Nazareth, King of the Jews. And of course he was the King of the Jews. Pilate seems to have meant it for mockery, and the audience who's reading this then now actually knows this for sure. And finally, Luke chapter 23, and the people stood by watching, and even the rulers were sneering at him. He saved others, let him save himself. Well, the onlookers, by saying he saved others, let him save himself, he's the Christ. By not saving himself, he saved others. And again, this is irony, and it's used throughout the scriptures. As you can see, there's all kinds of irony through there. Go slowly when you reach these narrative parts so you catch the ironies that are there, because it's using literary devices to teach you things about what God is in control of and what God's not. God's in control of all that brings glory to him. He's not in control of, I'm going to say this poorly, there's nothing he's not in control of. That's better. But irony is meant to show you that he's going to use literary devices all the time to show him. So there's been irony in the story. Jotham's uttering of a curse on the mountain of blessing, Gideon's son, who's the exact opposite of Gideon, and God uses chaos to rescue the father and destroy the son. Those are all irony, and you miss those parts of the story that makes it a rich thing to look at, and God gets the glory because he's involved with all of it. These are not accidental irony. This is planned and intentional, as God wants to tell us that he's in control. All right, so next week, in theory, we're going to go through chapters 10 and 11. Tola and Jair. Tola has 3 verses ascribed to his reign, and Jair about the same. Jephthah, though, I will be honest with you, Jephthah is a mystery and a conundrum to me. So we'll see what you have to say as you study the passages. Yeah.
Good morning. I was thinking, when I was writing this morning, I was listening to Galatians, and I think the gospel is ironic.
It is ironic, yeah. Yeah. Even the prophecy about the gospel, right? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. That's irony. Yeah, don't miss those things. Those are the really telling stories of the richness of the fabric of God's message throughout for all redemption. So, no, thank you. All right, any other questions or criticisms or complaints or any existential crises? All right, let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you again, just the way you've shown yourself to be God of all creation. Whether it's using the creation for the retribution against Abimelech or the plans that you have made from the beginning. Father, you use irony left and right to be able to establish that even through the mouth of babes, truth can be told. Father, may it be so with us. May our words utter your truth as we want to see people come to know you. Help us to point the way to you and your involvement in your people and your history. And we'll give you all the thanks and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.